This episode of Ticket Volume is brought to you by us, Invigate. Get service operations under control in no time. Get 1 free month of our software solution by going to try.invigate.com. Gene Kim is a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, researcher, and multiple award-winning CTO. He's been studying high-performing technology organizations since 1999 and was the founder and CTO of Tripwire for 13 years. He's the author of 6 books, The Unicorn Project, and the co-author of Accelerate, the DevOps Handbook, and the Phoenix Project. Since 2014, he has been the founder and organizer of Enterprise Technology Leadership Summit, a great conference, and he's keeping busy by studying the technology transformations of large, complex organizations. Welcome to Ticket Volume live webinars where good service is good business. And these episodes are an opportunity to be the news. I am your host, Matt Beran, and this week I get to geek out with Gene Kim about technology and management styles. But since I was on mute, let's delay no longer and let's begin. Welcome to Ticket Volume, Gene.
Yeah, I'm delighted to be here, Matt. And again, congratulations on all your achievements. And I think the last time we hung out was like 3 years ago. Anyway, so just congratulations, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Yes, my pleasure. And thank you for being here. And thank you for your contributions. I own all of these books, and they have all been very useful and informative. I write tons and tons of notes. I'm one of those. I commit sacrilege on my books, and I write right in them, and they all have tons of writing in them because your ideas are profound and so useful. And I'm going to keep pumping you up through this entire episode, so I hope you're ready to feel pumped up.
Let's do it. Yeah, in fact, it's been so. In fact, I'll just turn it over to you. But yeah, it's been so fun to be able to, be studying something for 25 years, and it's also very humbling to sort of take a look at an area that you think you know well, and yet sort of reveal these other dimensions that one didn't see or didn't fully appreciate fully. So it's been a very rewarding experience. Yeah, and certainly my experience in the service management community that started back in 2005 was certainly the part of my journey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's how we met. You were speaking at conferences and kind of leading the way. You were leading the way from service management to DevOps, which was really the next thing, so to speak, at that moment. And I really appreciate you. And as you continue to share what you're learning, we are so lucky to get to do this, aren't we? To just get to talk and philosophize about work. What a great situation to be in. And you just hosted the virtual Enterprise Tech Leadership Summit Europe. How did it go? Was it a good event? I didn't get to attend.
Oh yeah. In fact, just to maybe describe what maybe it was like, kind of maybe for service management in the DevOps world, and then 2010. Something really unusual happened in the technology community in 2009, and it was this famous presentation that John Allspaw and Paul Hammond gave, saying we're doing 10 deploys a day every day at Flickr. And so this is in the at the Velocity conference, and so this is like the kind of DevOpsy conference, probably where the movement, probably one of the 3 places it started. But even there, like, you had ops practitioners just fainting in the aisleways because it just sounded so reckless and irresponsible and immoral, right? Because we correlated production deployments with global carnage and disruption and mayhem, right? And so, like, what sort of maniac would want to be doing it 10 times a day, right? And so what's astonishing is that that became probably one of the most visible parts of the DevOps movement, is that Amazon went on by 2011 they were doing 15,000 deployments per day, and by 2015 they're doing 136,000 deployments per day. And so it just shows that this is they were able to enable independence of action to help small groups independently deliver value to their customers. And so my area of study for the last 10 years have been studying not so much the tech giants of Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, Microsoft, but instead how are large, complex organizations across every industry vertical, government agencies, military services, right, doing the same thing to help win in the marketplace, to better advance societal goals and so forth. And so that was originally called the DevOps Enterprise Summit, but we were at the Enterprise Technology Leadership Summit, and it's just this continues. It was an amazing event, and it just continually reinforces that this is the technology community that is continually pushing the frontiers of performance. And if I can just sort of mention one thing, is so these were the sort of renegades that were sort of pushing DevOps into their organizations. And I would say a quarter to a third of them are now being given the responsibility for the rollout or governance of AI technologies, right? Because, everyone sees the potential value, but also the incredible potential existential risk of, allowing copyrighted images to go into your photo editing software. So, anyway, so it was just, we had one talk from Brian Scott. He's a cloud architect at Adobe, and he's now being responsible for the co-owning the responsibility of the AI rollout across, thousands of developers at Adobe. So it was just it was so fun, and just to see where the frontier is going. Anyway, sorry for the long answer, Matt.
No, that's great. I think you bring up such a valid point. If you are successful in leading a positive change within an organization with a group of people, yeah, you're going to be asked to do it again and again and again, because that is the one constant, right? We know that VUCA is here, that volatility, that uncertainty, that complexity and ambiguity it's here to stay. And I think that's one of the reasons that I know it's one of the reasons that you continue to study work. And I think it's one of the reasons that this book, Wiring the Winning Organization, is such an important add to our bookshelves and to our lexicon. The phrases that you use help us create the tactics to deliver that change, that slowification, simplification, and amplification. I love those three concepts. And I really like your simple explanations of them too. Slowification is making solving problems easier to do. Simplification makes problems themselves easier to solve. So that's modularization, defining the handoffs, incrementalization, linearization. And then amplification is making it obvious that there are problems that demand attention and whether they've been seen and solved. Did I do a good job summarizing those?
Absolutely right. In fact, can I just go back one step? And I just want to echo what you said in this world of VUCA, right? It is interesting, right? It is, and your sense of like what leaders are asked to do. I love this phrase. Why are they given more responsibility? It's because they see what they're doing, and it's not about the fad. It's about the fact that they are creating, outcomes that matter to people who matter, and everyone knows that they have the best long-term interests of the organization at heart. And so, of course, the natural response is going to be, hey, can you solve an even bigger problem for us? And so, well, for some people, right, these the characters of VUCA might cause fear, uncertainty, timidness, right? For other people, saying, no, this is an opportunity and or a risk that we have to go compete and win, right? So that we can continue to serve our customers and thrive. So I just want to echo down on that. And your depictions of the three mechanisms to characterize performance, absolutely right on. In fact, if I can just describe kind of where it came from. In the DevOps community, we often say that it's a kind of the spiritual successor of Lean and the Toyota Production System. And, I thought I knew a little bit about that. And I do remember reading in 2002, this famous Harvard Business Review article called Decoding the DNA of the Toyota Production System. And it was written by Dr. Stephen Spear. And it was this was actually part of his doctoral dissertation that he did at the Harvard Business School, where he actually worked on the plant floor of a tier 1 Toyota supplier for 6 months. And so I remember reading with actually Kevin Baer, one of my co-authors of the Phoenix Project. And we're reading this and kind of like just sort of marveling at the notion of thousands of people in Toyota at a plant, working as a continually learning in a community of scientists. It's like, oh my gosh. So I met him in 2014, and I took a workshop from him at the MIT Sloan School of Business. And we started working about 3 years ago, really in the quest to answer two questions. Why do organizations work the way they do, both in the ideal and not ideal? And then this kind of other sort of question, which is like, what really is in common between, Agile and DevOps and Lean and the Toyota Production System and, psychological safety and resilience engineering and so much more. And Conway's Law. And kind of our conclusion is that they are all incomplete expressions of a far greater but simpler whole. And those three mechanisms that you described, slowification, simplification, amplification, are what actually underpin all of these movements and frameworks and so forth. Is that, as you said, slowification is how do we move our most complicated, dangerous work from production into planning and practice. Simplification is like how do we partition problems so that they are easier to solve, and then amplification is how do we create a system that even takes the weakest signals of failure and not only detects them, right, but actually corrects the issue, ideally prevents them, so that won't happen again. And these are all sort of like what you need, to create systems that fully liberate people's full creativity and problem solving capabilities, as opposed to systems that somehow put everyone in little boxes and constrain them, or maybe even extinguish them entirely. How am I doing, Matt?
Really good, really good. I think what struck me is that their phrases, they're simple words to describe the ways that we know already work for working, right? We like, for instance, the first project I was ever on where we used a prototype before we start building developer stories. It was literally like, here's a Figma design of the application we're going to be building, and we can decide whether we like it or not before we get into scoping and stories and epics and trying to figure out all the details. And there wasn't a word for that. And so it gives it a word, and it makes it so that people can see, oh, if we do this, if we simplify this or slowify it, then we can make decisions further upstream to not waste so much money, not waste so much time, and waste all that frustration and collaboration that had to happen in our waterfall days, right?
Yeah. In fact, yeah. So that was actually one of the things that we really set out to do in the book, right? And by the way, I cannot tell you what, it was by far the most intellectually stimulating, but and challenging thing I've ever worked on, but also the most rewarding. And when you describe that, I mean, that was actually one of the things that we wanted to set out, was that in any my words for what you just said is, how do you do this joint cognition, joint problem solving well? And so we open up the book with this metaphor. If you don't mind, like 90 seconds of performance art, it's how do you describe what you just said in the simplest possible way? And so we said, all right, imagine two people moving a couch. Let's call them Steve and Gene. And so you might think that this is all brawn work. There's no creativity or brain work involved. And yet there are all these questions that they have to answer that don't have obvious answers, which is like, where exactly is the center of gravity, around to get through a narrow doorway, around which axis do they rotate, to get through a narrow, winding, dark set of stairs? Do they, who goes first? Do they face forwards or backwards?
Yep.
They don't need consultants. They don't need, focus groups, just by picking up the couch, fast feedback, experimentation, trial and error, and most importantly, communication, coordination, right? We can trust that they'll be able to achieve the goal. But there are all these things that we as leaders can do to make their work more difficult. For example, we can turn off all the lights. So, it becomes, will take longer, become more dangerous. They can damage the furniture, the room themselves. And, that's one dimension. The other one is we can introduce a lot of background noise, right? Like music, siren, so they can't communicate and coordinate. In fact, we can even put in an intermediary and prevent Steve and Gene from talking directly to each other. In fact, make them go through, ServiceNow tickets or Jira tickets or requirements documents or account managers or project managers or lawyers. And then suddenly you can imagine that, Steve and Gene might not be able to finish the job, right? Yeah. And so it kind of exposes two. So as I said, this is a metaphor for joint cognition, joint problem solving. And so there's a metaphor for cohesion and coupling. Cohesion, to what extent, coherence. To what extent are we enabling Steve and Gene to act as a unified whole, right? Yeah. If we partition them, right, they're not actually able to work as a team. And then coupling, right? The notion that, what affects Steve affects Gene and vice versa. And, some work should be very coupled together, right? Like, the joint creation of that feature in Figma to code to, feedback. Yeah. And some things shouldn't, right? Like if you require approvals from 35 different supervisory bodies, right? Well, then you're too coupled to everyone else, right? And how do you sort of decouple? Anyway, sorry for the long explanation, but Matt, does this resonate with you and your experiences?
Totally, 1,000%. And I love the metaphor of couch moving, because it's something that I don't know. I don't want to assume that everyone's done it, but I think a lot of people have done it. If you went to college, you definitely at some point had to move a futon with your roommate. It's such a good metaphor, because you look at it and you're like, just do the thing. You just move the couch. But I love that how you introduce the constraints, right? Those design constraints, those system constraints that we have. maybe this intermediary does provide chaos, but there's a reason that intermediary is there. Maybe it's for compliance. Maybe we have to have the lights off for compliance. We're hiding the P2 or the PII information. And so I love that concept because it's universal and instantly understandable. And if you've moved a couch or a futon, you know that there's a point where you want to yell at the other person, like, can you please lift it higher? Can you please push it up the stairs faster? It's such a good metaphor.
Yeah, and and it's I think for us it's really meant to be a construct to say what is different about two people moving a couch versus two people moving two chairs independently, where there is actually no need to communicate and coordinate unless if you have to go through a narrow doorway at the same time, right? And so I think it gives us very simple tools to say, all right, to get lots of people to work together towards a common goal, right? We need very simple mechanisms to describe the world around us.
Bingo. Yep. Simone has a good point here. So our first experience of prototyping competence is as a child building sandcastles and making mud pies.
Yeah. In fact, so I would say, your prototyping, your fast feedback, that's an example of what we call simplification. We're partitioning the problem so that they're easier to solve. And this notion of like doing things incrementally in small batches, right? That is absolutely, whether it's a sandcastle before actually making a large one, right? Your prototype before, committing, 100 developers to it, right? We want to sort of know, we want the quickest feedback with the easiest effort possible, right? The whole notion of minimal viable product and so forth. Absolutely.
Exactly. So if you're joining us today, we've got quite a crowd. If you've got questions for Gene, throw them into chat. We can bring them in. Just like we did with Simone's comment, I'll add another one here that we should change VUCA to vibrant, unreal, crazy, and astounding. I love a good positive spin on just not knowing what the hell is going on.
I love that. Actually, I'm writing that down right now.
I love it. Okay, so some of the points in your book that really stood out to me are just some of the phrases. I really like in the preface, there's one where it says, when people's days are miserable, the organization's performance is miserable too. And I think one of the reasons that really stands out to me is we've been seeing this trend, at least in the service management side of IT, where specifically on the service desk and specifically in service and support roles, that mental health is a huge aspect of whether we're able to be successful. How can we manage efficiently? How do we maximize people's performance? And we're finding out that people's miserable days need to be not miserable anymore. Do you find that is something that kind of always comes up when you're thinking about how high performing organizations work, is around mental health?
Yeah, I think the two are inextricably linked. Let me just, so I co-wrote the book called The Phoenix Project. It was almost 10 years ago. And I wrote that 3 years after I actually left Tripwire. We had finished our S1 filing to go public. I had left so I could actually spend 3 years, finishing that book. And one of the things was that we're trying to evoke how sometimes it felt especially in IT operations, it felt very helpless, right? And one becomes cynical and, one feels burned out, cynical, jaded. And it actually turns out that correlates with a whole body of knowledge around burnout. And so the pioneer there is Dr. Christina Maslach. She's now retired, but she was professor emeritus at, I guess you are professor emeritus forever at the University of California, Berkeley. And she said she actually spoke at a conference that we had some years ago, and she said, we for decades we've studied about we said burnout is like the canaries in the coal mines, right? And she said for decades, our the goal of the field was to create more resilient and hardy canaries, right? And she said, no, really, that really misses the bigger point, which is like, what is it about the coal mine owner that's causing people, these canaries to die, right? That's actually the more important question. And that very much resonates with my own research, where we found in the state of DevOps research, it spanned 36,000 respondents over 6 years. I did with Dr. Nicole Forsgren and Jez Humble. What we found is that, you have all these amazing technology measures, right? High deployment frequency, fast deployment lead times, fast recovery rates, slow mean time to repair, better security. But people were twice as likely to recommend their organizations as a great place to work to their colleagues and friends. They were twice as likely to exceed profitability, market share, and productivity goals. They were twice as likely for not-for-profits to achieve organizational and mission goals, regardless of how they defined it, whether it was quality, quantity, or customer satisfaction. So and to me, what that says, it very much resonates with one of the key themes in the book, is that in one end of the performance spectrum, you have everyone actively engaged, solving important problems in parallel. Everyone has what they need when they need it,
Yep.
in the right format. That the dynamic feedback all the time, going to the right people, so they can learn and experiment. And there's opportunities to solve and improve problems. Not in production, but in planning and practice.
Yeah.
These are what lead to people being able to solve important, meaningful problems, versus the other side, which is that no one has what they need. And when they have it, it's in it's the wrong format. To get what they need, they have to politic and communicate and coordinate and scavenge and forage and escalate and
Fight.
fight. Yeah, right. And everyone's stuck, right? Even doing small things requires superheroic efforts. And even when you can actually move across the finish line, the results are something that no one's proud of. So no wonder, if you live in that situation day after day, after month after month, after year, I think that one can, get a little mentally fatigued, or feel helpless, or feel like their work doesn't matter. And so I would say, this is a function of the wiring that leadership creates. Winston Churchill said, "We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us." Mm-hmm. So too as we as leaders, at all levels of the organization, we are responsible for creating the conditions for our people to do their work easily and well. And I would say all of the practices, all of the techniques, all stem from, you can derive from that principle. As you as a leader, are you enabling people within your part of the organization to the work easy and well? And you don't need, as a leader, you don't need permission from anybody, right? That's your job. And so it was just so gratifying to be able to sort of say, what is this really all about? So I guess, sorry for the long winding response, but
stop apologizing for your long responses, Gene. I love your long responses, because
it says not only are you correct, but you as a leader are responsible, right? Like, we don't study the canaries and build hardier canaries. No, we are the people who are responsible for the conditions of whether canaries live or die.
It's such a good point, Gene. I want to get an amen from the audience, because you're right that that this is the point of best practices. This is the point of these concepts and ideas that we are constantly fighting to discover and to learn, and we're reading dozens of books about. If it's not about removing bureaucracy or improving our mental health, then what are they even for? Because we all want to be successful already. Like, it's not to inspire us to want to be successful. We want the success inherently, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'm going to post a link here. Here he is, Chuck Lafferty at ADP. One of the, in fact, I didn't make this connection until you just mentioned it. I'm going to put this in this is Chuck Lafferty. He was just promoted to VP at ADP, and he gave this amazing presentation. So he owns the software that the call center support desk uses at ADP. So one of the largest payment providers. The people who, if you get a paycheck, right? They a TripAdvisor, they went through ADP, and they said the condition, the how well the support staff call center does, right, is what allows us to win or lose, right? And if they're not happy, our customers can't be happy. And they actually have a whole research department, and it's part of their marketing campaign to show that about the employee engagement. And so, like, for me, it was a very kind of like Inception, like recursive stories. Like, he is building the software. He needs to create active, engaged developers who actively care about make the software to allow actively engaged customer support people, right? So they can, retain and their best customers. And it was just amazing to see how they would not just listening to calls, but they would co-pilot, what do you call it, like you would co-drive, you would sit side by side with the support staff, right, and just find any place of toil or friction, right, to better enable them to serve their customers. It was so cool. And right, what was the reward of that? He got promoted from senior director to VP, just because that everyone knew that everything he does is on helping advance the long-term objectives at ADP.
Yeah, and you're improving employees' lives, and as a result, the customers' lives. It's very nesting doll. It's very nesting doll.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a ton of great comments and questions from our listeners today. A lot of them are about you as an author, specifically, like writing books. So here's one from Mr. David Barrow specifically. What are your tips to go from author to Wall Street Journal best-selling author? David's written a lot of books, so he's curious about how you've made that transition.
Oh yeah, great question. How do you go from author to best-selling author?
Well, I guess the question
Yeah.
is like, do you feel like Phoenix Project was the first book, right?
Yep. And
Did you
then
feel like Unicorn got better? Do you feel like you got and you had co-authors with all the rest of the books? So, like, how did you get better?
yeah. Well, so yeah, I think there's two things. I want to give you like the highest fidelity, most useful non-platitude answer that I can. Yeah. So yeah, Matt, you're pointing out one thing, right? Is that you have to love writing and do more of it. I feel like I've written, I'm guessing for every word that gets printed, there's probably 3 words that get thrown away. And as the famous comedian Jerry Seinfeld said, he said, "Comedy is a game of tonnage." Right? It's just, so that comment just really resonated with me. 2 is this may seem like a little bit of an oblique answer, but I feel like it's the most honest one I can give. Is that in anything that I do, I want it to have 2 characteristics. One is I want to be learning something. Right. So high learning, right? I feel like it's learning something that is actually that I feel is important to get from here to there, wherever there is. The second one is it has to be high networking, meaning you're hanging out with the best in the game, right? And the best in the game in a field that you feel is also relevant and interesting to you. And I think when you go on a journey like that, and you are that selective, then it takes you. You end up surrounding yourselves with the right people. So it's not just other subject matter experts, like Matt, but also people who are in a position to help sort of amplify your work. And so another thing that Matt just happens to be also really good at. And so, I love this kind of the way I put it in my head is that, in order to go on level 30 quests as a, level 3, grunt, like, me, right. You have to hang around level 30 people. Right. And, and by doing that, you go on really great quests. You level up faster, I think kind of maybe the missing element is who are the people who are actually finding ways to just have these amazing amplification abilities, right? That to make sure that, as Tim Ferriss said, obscurity is difficult to monetize. I know we're not talking about monetization here, but just says that everything is harder to do when you're obscure. So, I think I'm hoping that will give you some seeds of like maybe some missing elements that might be worth pursuing with more deliberateness. Does that resonate with your own experience, Matt?
Good tips, great tips, and it's a great segue back into the book because you're this level 3 grunt. You're just grinding away trying to get to level 4. And you're trying to find these level 30 people, these sages and wizards,
death mages, and like necromancers. I didn't even say grand. I meant thug, right? You're level 3 thug, right? And it's like that's how I felt hanging out with these people. Absolutely right.
And it's the same in the organization, right? You're looking for this social circuitry. You're looking to connect with these people that are either they're batteries. They are holding all the power. They are resistors. They are people that understand where the constraints are and where the problems are. And you surround yourself with these people that build social circuitry for your goals, whether it is an organizational goal, like something professional, or it's something that you're personally trying to do. And it's something that I've felt. I think it's such a great metaphor because of that throughput and resistance specific. But it also seems super logical. Do you find that you can just say social circuitry and people understand what it means, or do you find that you need to explain it and that there's more to it that I'm not picking up on even?
Yeah, that's great. I think so. One of the things that Dr. Steven Spear, introduced into the book that I was initially very skeptical about, but some weeks later, I'm like, oh no, that's a little huge light bulb went off. He said there's basically he asserted that there's 3 places where we work. Layer 1 is like the object in front of us. It could be the studio, it could be the code, the binary running in production, right? the ticket in front of us, right? So that's, or better yet, the patient, that we're operating on. Layer 2 is the tools and technology. So that could be the IDE, the Kubernetes platform, the MRI machine, the CAT scanner. And then layer 3 is all the organizational processes and routines and habits and norms and run books that allow and that dictate who talks to who, right, in order to get what they need. And so it was actually, so organizational wiring, social circuitry. I mean, I got it. And so it's actually meant not figurative, but metaphorical. In a electronic circuit and a mechanical circuit, it is a way to go from where, it's how you take something from where it is to where it needs to go. And so when you are stuck in a system where no one has what they need when they need it in the right form, I mean, that's a function of the social circuitry. And so we as leaders create it. And I think it's just it vividly creates that now we're using terms that we as engineers, right? Many of us come from an engineering background, or at least are engineering minded, right? Yeah. This is something that we create. And by the way, one of my heroes is Dr. Ron Westrom, who created the Westrom organizational typology model. He studied aviation safety, nuclear reactor safety, medical safety, and he said there's kind of three types of cultures that are the most predictive of performance and safety. One was pathological cultures, where we hide information, messengers of bad news are shot, we discourage bridging between teams. The second category was bureaucratic cultures, where we create processes to protect people, which sound great, right? Appeal to my service management journey. And then he called the highest performers generative, which are, we actively seek novelty. We train messengers to tell bad news. We encourage bridging between teams. If you know that uptime and availability isn't just opposite job, information security isn't just InfoSec's job, it's everybody's job, especially developers. And that was actually the second highest predictor of performance. The first one was actually architecture, which to what degree can teams work independently, right? So also I'm very familiar. But Dr. Westrom said that culture is very, in his words, gossamer and ethereal, right? Meaning it's not very concrete. It's very difficult to talk in the specifics. And so our treatment in the amplification chapter really says, all right, how would Dr. Claude Shannon, the creator of information theory, talk about it? And we said it's all about signals. So we can take those same things that Dr. Westrom expressed and say, is this a signal generation problem? No new. Is that a transmission problem? Meaning, who would tell bad news if every bad messenger of bad news is shot? Is it a reception problem? And like what Dr. Shannon taught us was that we measure success of any communication by the receiver, right? The receiver measures the success, not the transmitter, right? Is it a prioritization problem? Is it a, verification of the countermeasure, right? And those are all things that are very easy to. It's a better tool to diagnose, and so and this all made possible by imposing this organizational wiring metaphor, right? Because nodes in the system have a very specific job to do. Anyway, so another long-winded answer, Matt. Sorry.
No, that's what we want. That's what we're here for. Because we got the book, we need to go further. Some more great questions here. How is the explosion of practice guidance simplifying things? It seems like it has the opposite effect, right? Like, and we see this in the service management space. Now we have to learn DevOps. Now we have to learn AI. So, is it guiding us towards a better future, Gene?
Oh my gosh, John Worthington. I hope you're doing well. Long time no see. So. Boy, it really resonates with me. I mean, I think in every domain, we're seeing kind of an explosion of guidance. And there's actually one other compounding factor, which is that we have an ever increasing number of functional specialties. And so, we have 24 case studies in the book, and of which 20% are technology related. But the biggest one is actually medicine, and and specifically the emergency departments. And I think that's amazing because there's the emergency department is just notorious for, safety issues, missed handoffs, communication, coordination issues. And that would lead to accidents, sometimes fatalities. In fact, we have a case study called, it was a famous case called Miss Morris versus Miss Morrison.
Where they have the same name.
Yeah, that's right. So it was an example where the wrong patient got operated on, despite 14 sometimes very obvious signs that something was amiss,
Yeah.
including the patient saying, "You've got the wrong patient." The fact that there was actually a scar where, already where that showed that there was also a very recent procedure done. Anyway, so that was given as an example of like the need to slowify, right? It's like at a certain point, you got to say, we've lost awareness of what's going on. We got to stop and regain situational awareness, so forth. But it turns out that's one of the biggest aha moments in the book is the fact that healthcare systems weren't always this way. If you go back to the 1950s, the emergency department was at the hospitals actually somewhat easy to manage because there were only two functional specialties, doctors and nurses. At layer 1. You had almost no layer 2. You had maybe x-rays, right? And then layer 3, you could get away with a very simple layer 3 social circuitry. Fast forward 70 years, now you have 20 different functional specialties just within clinicians. You have nurses, supply chain, pharmacy, right? You have technology everywhere. In fact, radiology is not called radiology. It's not just x-rays. It's MRI machines, CAT scans, blood tracers, etc. Imaging. Yes, it's called imaging. And then you have all IT. And then you have this requires orders of magnitude more sophisticated social circuitry in layer 3 to to coordinate all of those functional specialties towards a common objective. And so the reward of that is that you can say that now you have a whole bunch of people who know everything about nothing, right? Like, when does it all zero up? It's like there are so many illnesses that would have been basically terminal in the 1950s. Now you have 80% chance of success of survival, right? Because of early detection of cancer and better therapies, etc. Same thing's happening in technology. Anyway, so the two big drivers that make management so hard and leadership so hard these days is ever increasing number of functional specialties and the need to know more, right? So on the one hand, yeah, unfortunately, you do need a lot of guidance. But I think what I find so exhilarating about the book, working with Dr. Spear, right across all these, given our respective backgrounds of which you think there's actually zero overlap in the Venn diagram, is what we're saying is that despite all of that, there are only three, mechanisms of improving performance, right? And in this slowification, simplification, amplification, and they all exist in layer 3. I'm sorry, one last thing I'll mention is, like, whenever you see like these great worst to first stories, like the NUMMI joint venture between Toyota and General Motors, where they went from the worst performing plant in around the globe, right, to the best performing, whether it's a DevOps transformation story like Amazon. What's amazing is that they're all done with the same people, same capital equipment, same floor space, same data centers, same same underlying technologies. But so it means that the only thing that changed is in layer 3. Nothing changed in layer 1 and layer 2. And it just shows how and leaders are responsible for creating that. And so just to John's question, right? It's like all that guidance out there, right? Given the more nooks and crannies of these increasingly not arcane, but deep areas of knowledge. I mean, I think we do need very specific guidance, but we can take comfort in that. Really, the mechanisms that they should be recommending really do fall into 3 categories. And for me, I find great joy that anyone can take something simple, make it appear complex, right? I think the more useful thing is take something complex and really show that it can be simple.
Yeah. I do think it is improving people's lives, don't you? I mean, it doesn't always, right? Like you try applying a concept and maybe it works, maybe it does improve people's lives, maybe it doesn't. It comes down to the desire to actually want to do it. Because, like, let's take digital transformation, for example. Like, you're trying to switch from waterfall to more agile methods of delivery, and you hire someone or you don't hire someone, you train someone, whatever you do, however you try to apply it, if you don't see the results, if you don't improve, you should be trying again. Like, if that is the goal, then try again, hire a different person, try a different concept, try a different way of applying that concept, and eventually you'll get there, right?
Yeah, I'll give you another maybe something like a kind of aha moment for me. Let's take an example of like the support function. If I remember hearing you talk about the role of like supporting internal employees versus external customers, and I think I think they result in different wiring. For example, right, the traditional support function, right? Maybe the goal is to empower the best first call resolution by level 1 staff, right? Or maybe another question is like, does that lead to a situation where the most important problems always will take the longest to resolve because we're waiting too long before escalation? Or if this is for an internal product, maybe the best thing that we should do is actually put developers, alongside support staff, and the feedback should never, should not be buffered from the developers, but they should actually be flowing directly to them, right? Because they're the people who have the most power to actually be able to, potentially solve a whole category of issues. And so I think, or is it like a 911 function where it's like, okay, this is all about, we want everyone to do the exact same thing because this is, the science behind every step, and, telling the person on the other end of the phone how to administer CPR, right? That, that can save lives. And we actually want rigid, execution of specific procedures, right? So, I think it's up to the leader, right, at all layers, right, to know what are the system level goals and how do we rewire it to get the outcomes that we want.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. Because you painted there specifically like 3 different things you can try, and if you're not willing to fail and then try again, you won't understand the constraints of why it failed, and then from that, then you can choose new methods. I really do feel like we need to be more accepting of failure. We need to be more okay with saying we made a mistake. Let's try something new, right? Like it culturally, I think broadly culturally, that's something we need to get better at.
Because improvement is inherently an experimental and iterative process, right? This is just like product development is an inherently iterative and experimental process. So if you can't know the right answer all the time, well, then you're going to have to accept the fact that it's iterative and experimental, and some things aren't going to work.
Nice. So we've got a shout out to the OSC open service community from Sean here, that this is one of his favorite things about this community. It's become a group of people that inspire him to keep improving. We certainly see that people are sharing, we're spinning up a problem management practice. How should I approach that? We continue to see people in that community say, hey, how can I approach this new idea? And that's a great place to go to find all the things that you could try. What are the things that have worked? What are the things that haven't worked? And in what situations is it going to work well? We've got a great comment here from Marie saying that a good support employee experience underpins and impacts the customer experience. Of course, I love that you pointed that out. And then I've got another question here from Ben. How long did it take you to write the Phoenix Project? It is a stone cold classic.
I think we started the first lines. It was George Spafford and I. We started writing actually with Kevin Bear, probably around early 2000s, and that was one of the reasons why. Remember when Kevin and I got Dr. Eliyahu Goldratt on a call in 2004, and so he was the author of The Goal. Constraints. Yeah, and yep, and so that's the novel about a plant manager who has to fix his cost and due date issues in 90 days, otherwise they shut the plant down. And so if that sounds familiar, right, it's because the Phoenix Project was absolutely inspired by and homage to The Goal. In fact, it's in some ways a direct copy of it. Same word count, same narrative style, same kind of configuration of characters. So and it was I had kept start off as something called the quotes file on my Sony Clie, my
nice.
Palm Pilot, and then on my BlackBerry, and then on my iPhone, that I carried with me. Right, basically every time I heard something that was really funny or incredible, and it would go in there. And so so we worked, we were just grinding on away part time. And in 2010, then I dedicated 2 years just to finishing it. I started working with a novel coach, and then so then it came out in 2013. So I would say
10 years of research,
10 years
of writing,
10 years. Yeah, I would say if you look for the very first Word doc files, that was probably early 2000s. So 10 years. But
yeah, you heard it from Gene here first. If you hear something that is interesting, put it down. I heard someone suggested yesterday, everyone needs a WTF notebook.
That's right.
Something crazy, throw it in there. It's so interesting to go back and read through your Evernotes and through your Apple Notes and see all the crazy ideas that you've heard. And I do it for mistakes too. Like I've got a Miro board of all the errors and mistakes I've made in my career. It is very useful information.
Maybe just to fill the kind of like the making of the Phoenix project. So the next step, once you have a bunch of quotes, right? So what do you do with it? And so the characters are actually designed to actually deliver the lines, right? So you had Bill, the VP of operations, right? And none of the real good ideas came from him. They came from Patty, who was kind of the I love processes more than I love people. But she was a source of all the best ideas. Wes was all the it will never work idea. So and it just became very natural which lines get delivered by who. And by the way, Patty was a service management person, obviously.
And we've got another question related to that, because Sophie wants to know how you pick that style. Because business books, like the Gold Rat is a perfect example. I read The Goal as a novel. It was okay. It was a lot of reading. And then I read it as a graphic novel because there's a comic book version. And the comic book version, like in my brain, it just works better. I can tell who the people are. And I think the same thing happened in the Phoenix Project, where you start to you see Wes. You're like, oh, I know Wes in my life. And then you're like, oh, that actually means Brian. Brian is this person. And she wants to know specifically, like, how did you decide to pick that style?
Yeah. And by the way, I wish I could show some of the early drafts of the Phoenix Project graphic novel that's going to be coming out in about a year.
Oh, spoilers!
It's wild. It's been so fun. So your question. I think it's been well known that stories are actually the best way to communicate. In fact, because for the receiver, right? Because our brains are inherently wired to receive good stories. And I loved The Goal. I've watched, I've listened to it, I've read it 20 times. Is that possible? 10? Yes. I'm sure. Whether it's entirety, I had to have. In fact, my wife will not allow me to play the audiobook anymore. It's just that hasn't been allowed for 10 years. So I know it has to be 10 plus. The category book is called The Business Fable. And then one of the ones that really was really tough for me to read was called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So I was at Tripwire for 13 years. I was a technical founder, and the book was about a screwed up company where the technical founder was being marginalized and just being a pain in the ass. And I'm reading, and there's no trust, and people throwing each other under the bus, and the CEOs, maybe a part of the problem is replaced. Anyway, I remember reading this book on a plane, and I remember. I felt like I could, my armpits were sweaty. I felt like I'd smell my own failure, and I couldn't read anymore. I wanted to throw the book in anger across the airplane cabin. And I'm like, because it was too real. But I did finish it. It was great.
Yeah.
And I would like to think that if that book kind of triggered those kind of emotions, that's actually would be a mark of a book that hopefully kind of achieves some of its goals, right? Because I think the way the book has been used in many places, like, man, let's have a book club about this, because here's a totally screwed up company that has nothing to do with us. But I think maybe let's see if it triggers any conversations, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's very successful. I'm glad that you did that. And that's another book actually that I read. I read the book, Five Dysfunctions of a Team.
Yeah.
And then I read the comic book. And the comic book worked that much better again. It also is a comic book version. Yes. Fantastic too.
Okay, I'm gonna buy it right now.
I highly recommend, yeah. So I've got another great question here from Simone. She says specifically, the monsters in the tales.
Oh yeah.
Which I love. I love this metaphor too, but it reminds her of old naval maps with the images of dragons. Gene, do you think this is something that we forget to consider in our current data, like in our digital day? After all, they're not just pretty things. They are real, intentional, uncharted, dangerous areas. Do you think that that's something that we forget?
I'm sure. Yeah. So the monsters and tales. It's so one of the things that to talk about slowification. So slowification is a made-up word, and it's really it was interesting that there are all these adages for it, but to know one English words that sort of describe this notion of you have to stop sawing to sharpen the saw, you have to slow down to speed up, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? No single word. And there's a school of thought that says if you can't say it, you can't think it. And so we want to say, all right, given Steve's academic bent and me, right? We're very remiss to make up a word, let alone put it in the subtitle. But the notion of we're making a short-term investment for a longer-term gain, it just seems so important. And it turns out a lot of things just fall out of it, like the Navy Top Gun project, right? If you rely on the job training, you're not going to get great outcomes. Every time that you see someone doing very consequential, dangerous work, they had to have invested in planning and practice, right? Because you can't get it right the first time. And that's where you build the habits and routines and intuitions, and some people call it experience. Dr. Gary Klein, so that's what experience is for, right? And a lot of it is about taking the time to think through a scenario and be able to do it like when you're not on fire, right? And so one of my favorite ones that I heard recently was seeing these big ransomware attacks, right? Is okay. This is the best time to ask what are our most business critical functions. How long can we go without it? How long will it take to restore it? And can we? Right. These are questions you want to sort of ask before someone has a figurative gun to your head and saying, if you want your data back, right, and you want your critical infrastructure back, pay me, right? So you have tabletop exercises to sort of ask yourself these questions, right? And if you don't know, okay, let's use this time to actually figure those out. Some of the case studies, another one was, what do you also have to do this when you're doing something for the first time that has literally never been done before. And so one of the case studies is the Apollo 11 lunar landing, right? Where a whole bunch of things go wrong. Like they release, the lunar lander releases 11 seconds early. They get a whole bunch of is it 6201 error codes, right? That actually causes the lunar computer display to go blank for 30 seconds, which causes for the first time Armstrong's pulse rate to go to 140, right? Because again, the 1201 error codes, and because there are also rocks where they had planned. Anyway, so it turns out they actually successfully land on the moon because they had actually rehearsed all these scenarios, because they had something called the simulation team that challenged the astronauts, backup astronauts, the capsule coordinators, mission control on these scenarios, right? That were sort of aggressively red teaming and tabletop exercising, the worst things that could happen to prepare the astronauts for a situation that they could not, no one had gone to the moon before. And by the way, I have an interview with Don Iles. He was the author of the lunar landing computer, right? That resulted in the 1201 error code. And it was just amazing to, I learned so many things in the book. Like one of them, like when I submitted that, like during the simulation where they threw the 1201 error code to the lunar landing, the team, I thought that, they had, who was in the loop? It was mission control, it was the astronauts. I'm like, no. They also made a call to MIT, right, to be able to, get a read on like what this error code was. Steve Spear and actually Admiral John Rusin was like, no, impossible, right? They could not be in the loop, too far away. Like you're in a crisis. And I talked to Don Iles, like,
what happened?
Were you in the loop?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was like, yeah, we were watching, but we didn't have a direct line. I mean, or because they. In a genuine crisis, you have only a very small team, that, and only a one hop away that they can reach out to, right? And they were not in that, and so it absolutely shows that that's part of the wiring that we create for crisis situations. But he said in Apollo 14, when a specific sensor went bad, right? They were in the loop, right? They had hours to generate a fix, and so it's just I love it just because I think people on the front line. In support, right? Your intuition would have also said, there are some conditions where you can escalate, and there are some conditions where no help is coming, right? We are literally on our own, but unafraid, as they say.
Yeah,
alone but unafraid.
I love that. If you see a dragon, if you see someone else, your example is perfect. Ransomware. Compliance issue. You see a dragon in someone else's organization. That is your sign to reflect. Are we ready for this dragon? Because it's coming. Or maybe it then never comes, but it's in the water. So don't forget about it.
Yeah, you might be in the predator pool. Right? I'm sorry, what the predators are out there, and you are just another prey to not just adversaries, but also Mother Nature and circumstance.
Okay, we've only got a few minutes left. We got a great comment here from Marie. She says specifically that slowification maps well to this concept in DEI and accessibility, where you actually add friction to processes and experiences to make interfaces more inclusive. Well, fascinating concept. I love it. And I think the other thing that I wanted to just kind of touch with you real quick before we end here in just a moment is what's got you jazzed right now? What is the next Wiring the Winning organization? What are you reading about right now? What's got you excited and working hard to understand?
These two are kind of one. They sound sort of. Yeah, it's. I have to say it's around all the modern miracles that are possible in AI. And so I'm interested in I'll tell the more kind of the more less surprising one first, and then the surprising one. Usually I would tell them the different direction. So the job of the technology leader is getting more and more difficult, right? Because we're adding more functional specialties, right? So you have not just dev, QA, ops, information security support, business analysts, blah, blah, but now you have data scientists, LLM, ML ops, blah, blah, blah. All these things they have to rewire, right, to get the outcomes that you want. And so it's, like I said, to see this community, the enterprise technology leadership community, being given significant stewardship of safely rolling these capabilities out, both internally and externally. Oh, so cool. Second thing is, Dr. Ethan Malik, he is a professor at the Wharton School, one of the biggest authorities in AI. He gave a talk on his latest book called Co-Intelligence. Just awesome. Anyone interested in AI, or everyone, period. If you don't think you're interested in AI, you need to read this book. It's about how society is going to change, etc. It's just effing awesome. He said everyone's going to have 3 nights where they can't sleep because they see something that just is so inspiring or something. I had one of those 2 weeks ago. So on my phone, every time I listen to a lot of podcasts, YouTube, yours also, right? And every time I take those screenshots, every time I hear something that catches my attention, I want to go back, I guess, and sometimes listen to it and write an article about it or something. But in reality, I have thousands of screenshots that just are in my phone and they go to die. So I wrote this little thing that basically takes these screenshots and ships them to GPT-4 Vision. And I ask it, what podcast was it? What episode? What's the time marker? Right. And then I wrote some stuff to go retrieve the transcripts and highlight it in place. So cool. So cool. I did that early this year. But then I asked, why am I interested? Why do you think I'm interested in these passages? And it gave 7 reasons. And 5 of them were like, oh my God. It's you were interested in the story because about a game company, the person, a game company founder, and in the early days it was just a developer and an artist, and they could do things. But then the project got bigger and bigger. Soon there are 100 people, and he didn't know, there was sound engineers working in sound booths, and there were blah blah blah, and he didn't know the names. And then he left, and now he's a solo developer again. But now he can only do solo developer things, right? And so what he can do is actually much smaller, right? So on the one hand, yes, you have specialization of skills and large teams, but that's so you can do bigger things. And this feeling that he had as being a solo developer again, right? So it was a bit wistful, and it sort of highlighted that. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And it hit me that I bet you I can write a prompt that I don't even need to highlight what I was interested in. I will give it a podcast, and I know I just have 90% certainty, that 100% certainty that I don't even need to highlight it. It will be able to derive, if I tell it what I'm interested in, it will highlight for me, right, what those best parts are. I just I could not sleep for 2 days just thinking about, all right, it'll take me 8 hours to get that running, and I will get such enjoyment and value out of it that will sort of pull together all those WTF moments, right? I'll be able to feed it that, and it will sort of tell me and distill why I wrote it down, and maybe even here's other examples of it. Anyway, so sorry
That is
So,
awesome.
it
It's
is-
such a good story because you take it from these are the things that I care about. Please summarize them to find things that I care about.
Yeah.
That is unreal, right? That's the
Yeah.
ultimate time saver, really.
Right. So I can't wait for the next couple of weeks just to move that forward, and I just know that will just be life changing for me.
Well, Gene, I want to thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for being on Ticket Volume. How can people get in touch with you if they'd like to learn more?
Oh yeah, just reach out to me probably on Twitter and LinkedIn. Twitter, I'm Real Gene Kim at on LinkedIn, Gene Kim, and yeah, always. I love hearing from people, and so and love being on this and the phenomenal questions from everyone here.
Yes, thank you for your time. Thanks for being on Ticket Volume, Gene.
And keep up all the amazing great work, and catch you soon, Matt.
Catch you soon. And if you like this episode, then you're going to love May's content as well. We're going to be discussing enterprise asset management along with compliance and the boundaries of that. Join us, bring questions, and really, we want your answers and ideas too. Get involved in Ticket Volume by reaching out to me. And if you've never been to one of our live recordings, register for free at invigate.com/ticket-volume. as that's where we send important information, downloadables, and other episode content. We've also dropped a link in the description. And to our viewers, what are you looking for? We've got tons of ideas and things, value that we can give to the community, but we need your input. Leave a comment, email us at ticketvolume@invigate.com, and thank you for listening to Ticket Volume. Speaking of Ticket Volume, did you know that this podcast is brought to you by Invigate? It's a fit-for-purpose service desk solution with integrated asset management designed to let you focus on supporting your organization without arduous implementations. In fact, service teams from Toyota, NASA, and McDonald's use Invigate to manage requests, automate workflows, and centralize inventory data so that they can focus on delivering better service. Because good service is good business.